Welcome to today's video, where we dive into the claims made about Donald Trump by the Democratic Party and set the record straight with cold, hard facts. No spin, no exaggeration, just the truth. Let's break it down. Now look, we all know that politics can be a bit of a circus. It's a cacophony of accusations, half-truths, and frankly, some really creative interpretations of reality. And in the case of Donald Trump, well, let's just say he's been a favorite target for, shall we say, constructive criticism from the Democratic side of the aisle. But amidst the partisan mudslinging, it's important to remember that facts still matter. So, today, we're putting on our metaphorical waders and venturing into the murky swamp of political rhetoric to separate the demonstrably true from the demonstrably false. Buckle up, folks, because we're about to fact-check some of the most common claims made about Donald Trump by the Democratic Party. Now, the Democrats have been singing this tune for a while now. Trump's tax cuts only helped the rich. The middle class got screwed. It's a catchy tune, I'll give them that, but let's see if it actually holds up to scrutiny, shall we? The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or TCJA as the cool kids call it, was passed in 2017 and, as you might expect, it cut taxes. Shocking, I know. But here's the thing, it cut taxes across all income brackets. Yes, even for those pesky middle-class folks the Democrats seem to think they have a monopoly on. According to the Tax Policy Center, a nonpartisan think tank, most middle-class households actually saw an average tax reduction of $1,600 in 2018. That's not chump change, folks. That's a decent chunk of money that families could use for, I don't know, groceries, bills, maybe even a weekend getaway to Branson, Missouri. Now, it's true that wealthier individuals received larger dollar value cuts, but that's because, well, they earn significantly more. It's like saying a giraffe eats more leaves than a field mouse. It's not exactly a groundbreaking revelation. But here's what the Democrats conveniently leave out. The TCJA also doubled the standard deduction. And who does that benefit the most? You guessed it, lower-income families. So, while the Democrats are busy screaming about tax cuts for the rich, they're conveniently ignoring the part where the law also provided significant relief for lower and middle-income Americans. It's classic political maneuvering, really. Focus on one aspect of a complex issue, ignore the rest, and hope nobody notices the sleight of hand. But luckily for you, dear viewers, you have us here to shine a light on these shenanigans. Ah, Charlottesville, a dark chapter in American history. And naturally, it involved Donald Trump saying something that sparked outrage and accusations of sympathizing with neo-Nazis. But did he really call them very fine people? The claim stems from Trump's comments after the 2017 Charlottesville protests, where a rally organized by white supremacists turned deadly. In his remarks, Trump condemned the violence on many sides, which immediately drew criticism for equating the actions of white supremacists with those protesting against them. And then came the very fine people comment. Now, taken completely out of context, it does sound pretty damning. But context, as they say, is key. Here's what Trump actually said. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. He then went on to say, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally. So to be clear, Trump was referring to the people protesting the removal of Confederate statues as very fine people, not the neo-Nazis or white supremacists. He explicitly condemned those groups. Now, you can argue whether or not those protesting the removal of Confederate statues deserve to be called very fine people. That's a whole other debate. But to claim that Trump called neo-Nazis very fine people is simply false. It's a classic example of selective editing and taking quotes out of context to fit a particular narrative. The infamous Muslim ban. It's a phrase that's been thrown around so much it's practically become synonymous with Trump's presidency. But was it really a ban on all Muslims entering the United States? In 2017, Trump signed an executive order restricting entry from several countries. Now, these weren't just random countries picked out of a hat. They were identified as posing potential security risks, and this designation actually began during the Obama administration. The list included countries like Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Notice anything about that list? Yes, they are all Muslim-majority countries. But here's the kicker. The list also included non-Muslim majority countries like North Korea and Venezuela. So, while it's true that the order disproportionately affected citizens from Muslim-majority nations, it was not a blanket ban on all Muslims. To call it a Muslim ban is simply inaccurate. Now, was the order discriminatory? That's certainly a valid argument to make. But to claim that it was a blanket ban on all Muslims entering the US is simply not true. It's a simplification of a complex issue and one that ignores key facts. Chapter 4. The economy. That fickle beast that politicians love to take credit for when it's doing well and blame on the other guy when it's not. And in the case of Donald Trump, the Democrats have been quick to blame him for any and all economic woes. But let's rewind to the pre-pandemic days, shall we? Remember those? Back then, the US economy was humming along quite nicely. Unemployment was at a record low of 3.5%, wages were growing, particularly for low-income earners, and the stock market was hitting record highs. Now, was this all due to Trump's policies? That's debatable. But to claim that he mishandled the economy is a bit of a stretch, to put it mildly. Then came 2020, and the world went to hell in a handbasket, economically speaking. The COVID-19 pandemic threw a wrench into the global economy, and the US was not immune. Businesses shut down, unemployment soared, and the stock market took a nosedive. Now it's easy to point the finger at Trump and blame him for the economic fallout of the pandemic. But that would be ignoring the fact that this was a global crisis, not a uniquely American one. Countries around the world experienced similar economic downturns, regardless of who was in charge. Blaming Trump exclusively for the pandemic-related economic woes is like blaming the captain of a ship for a hurricane. Could he have handled certain aspects of the crisis better? Perhaps, but to lay the entire blame at his feet is simply unfair and ignores the broader global context. Chapter 5. Abortion. The political hot potato that never seems to cool down. And when it comes to Donald Trump, the Democrats have painted him as some sort of anti-abortion zealot who wants to ban it outright. But is that really the case? Trump has certainly made his stance on abortion clear. He stated his support for limits on late-term abortions, a position that puts him at odds with many Democrats who support abortion rights throughout pregnancy. But here's the thing. Trump has not advocated for a nationwide ban on abortion. In fact, he said that he believes many abortion policies should be left up to individual states. Now, actions speak louder than words, and Trump's appointment of conservative judges to the Supreme Court has certainly given pro-choice advocates cause for concern. These judges are more likely to uphold restrictions on abortion, and their appointments could potentially lead to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision that legalized abortion nationwide. However, even if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, that wouldn't automatically make abortion illegal nationwide. It would simply return the issue to the states, where it would be up to individual legislatures to determine their own abortion laws. So, while Trump's stance on abortion may be more restrictive than some Democrats would prefer, it's simply not accurate to claim that he wants to ban it nationwide. Chapter 6. Now, this is a heavy one. The accusation of racism is a serious one, and it's one that's been leveled at Donald Trump repeatedly throughout his time in the public eye. From his comments about Mexican immigrants being rapists, to his attacks on the Squad 4 congresswomen of color, to his handling of the Charlottesville protests, Trump has certainly given his critics plenty of ammunition to support their claims of racism. And let's not forget the infamous Central Park 5 case where Trump took out full-page ads in New York City newspapers calling for the death penalty for 5 teenagers of color accused of a brutal attack, even though they were later exonerated by DNA evidence. These incidents, along with many others, have led many to conclude that Trump is, in fact, a racist. But is it fair to label someone with such a loaded term based solely on their words and actions? Trump's defenders argue that he's not racist, just politically incorrect. They point to his policies, such as the First Step Act, which reformed sentencing laws and reduced incarceration rates, disproportionately benefiting people of color. They also highlight his support for historically black colleges and universities, and his efforts to create jobs in minority communities. So, is Trump a racist? It's a complex question with no easy answer. There's no doubt that he's made racist remarks and that his policies have disproportionately harmed minority communities. But there's also evidence to suggest that he's not motivated solely by racial animus. Ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide whether or not they believe Trump is a racist. but it's important to consider all sides of the issue, and to avoid making judgments based solely on emotions or partisan leanings. As always, it's crucial to look beyond headlines and sound bites. Misinformation can come from any political party, and our job is to question, research, and uncover the facts. The truth is often far more nuanced than what's presented in the heat of a political debate. It's easy to get swept up in the outrage and the accusations, but it's important to remember that there are always multiple sides to every story. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fact-based content.